So good morning, everyone. So those of you who have never heard this sermon before, this is my M&M sermon. It is my annual Lenten M&M sermon, and that is because my favorite candy, Robin, is M&M's. Thank you very much. Thank you for playing. We have nice parting prizes for you. Okay, so Lent. I mentioned this early on. You know, Lent is this season that the church recognizes once we established when the death and resurrection of Jesus was. We then, knew that these days, these holy days, Holy Thursday, Good Friday, and of course Easter Sunday, are the centerpiece of our faith. They are truly foundational. If Jesus does not die and rise from the dead, then our faith, our presence here this morning, our lives of faith really mean nothing. So the early church knew that we had to prepare for these days, much like a runner prepares for a marathon, or anyone is preparing, say, for a musical, playing someplace or whatever. There takes practice. You have to focus. You sort of really draw yourself in, and you draw all of your energy in one direction, so that when those days occur and when they actually arrive, you're actually in a place, in a state where you are ready for them. For us as people of faith, we try to make sure that our faith is strengthened and focused for these days. So I got this question just this week, how come there are 40 days of Lent? Well, it comes out of the Hebrew scriptures. 40 basically meant a very long time. So the fact that Moses wandered in the desert with the promised people, is just an indication, that they were in the desert a long time. Noah in the ark, 40 days. I'm not sure we really know whether or not Noah was in an ark for 40 days or not, but we know that it was a long period of time. Jesus in the desert, 40 days. Again, simply a long period of time indicating. But now, as church, we take a look at 40 and we add 40. If you notice, there's 40 days before Christmas, called Advent, and there's 40 days before the celebration of the death and resurrection of Jesus, called Lent. So congratulations, here you are. You have arrived safely in Lent. The question that always comes to me is, what are we supposed to do? What do we do during Lent? What is it that is most important? And so different Christian traditions have literally different traditions for Lent. There is, of course, ashes on Ash Wednesday, indicating the beginning of the 40 days of Lent. There is no meat on Fridays, which, by the way, was really indicative of a time when meat was more expensive, and so eating fish was cheaper. The idea around not eating meat on a Friday was the fact that you would take the money that you would save for the meal on Friday and you would give it to the poor. Now you go to the fish store and fish is almost as expensive as meat. But there used to be a time when that was not, the case, and fish was plentiful and pretty cheap. So we have the Good Friday thing. And then, of course, everyone is giving something up. And this is where the M&M part of the story comes in. So listen, God bless you. So if I give up M&Ms, just saying it causes palpitations. But if I give up M&Ms, just for the sake of giving up M&Ms, it doesn't do anything. Very often when we look at the season of Lent, we think it's just about doing something because it's a season of Lent and we need to do something. So we give something up, right? But if it doesn't have an ulterior motive, if it doesn't have an object, if it doesn't have a goal, then don't give it up. And so those goals, which I've preached about time and time again, are really twofold. You want to do something that either brings you closer to one another or closer to God. Whatever it is that you feel during the season to prepare yourself. It's not a discipline for the sake of the discipline. Now, believe me, there are a lot of people who disagree with me, but I've lived in, a friary. I've lived a contemplative lifestyle in a monastery. I know that very often it's very easy to get stuck into, well, these are the 40 days, I'm going to give this up. And then that's it. You're doing it simply because the season or the institution tells you to do that. That's not the point. The point really here is that we are meant to prepare ourselves for the death and resurrection of Jesus, and we do that by doing the two things that Jesus really challenged and admonished us to do, which was love of God and love of neighbor. So during the season, if we are giving something up like M&Ms, if we do give up something like M&Ms, then the money from the M&Ms, right, that I withdraw from my enormous bank account and buy large boxes and cases weekly that arrive, that money then should be contributed to the poor. It should do something that, it is a way of giving something away and helping somebody else. Just to give it up because I want to lose 6 pounds before, Lent, isn't really the right idea or attitude, and regrettably, we all sort of fall into that. So let's talk for a minute about why is the death and resurrection so important, because that really is the centerpiece. Let's begin with the understanding that, and here's an example. Every building, even this one, has a builder. So we know that someone built this building. Every piece of art, there's an artist behind it. So can we simply agree that then behind creation, there is a creator? Okay? Very simple argument to sort of put aside our faith of saying, well, maybe there is no God. Well, if there is no God, then how is there creation? Creation cannot come from nothing. Has to have a source. It's just not logical, scientifically even, to consider that something comes from nothing. There would be nothingness. Nothing would produce nothing. Creation, goodness, God, creator, produces all of this. Now, we were created in this world that we have called, and Adam and Eve is the example, where everything was perfect. But because God gave us a free will, this is where all of our trouble comes in, even now. We have free will. It is a gift. It is probably the most precious gift that God has given to us, because God doesn't want slaves. He doesn't want servants. He wants friends. He wants a relationship. And our free will is meant to help us, or can help us, get closer to God or choose not to choose other than what is the goodness. Now, through Abraham and through Moses, God established covenants, but those covenants did not bring us close enough to God. God desired us so much in eternity that he had to figure out a way to have us go into eternity and to be close with him forever. And the problem is that God is God, and as such, he is absolutely merciful, but he is absolutely just. How does a creation, humanity, that is not perfect, come into a relationship with a God who is perfect? Something had to take place so that God's justice is satisfied, so he could bestow all the mercy he wants, and that's where Jesus comes from. That's why Jesus comes to earth. He comes to earth, one, I believe, if you look at Jesus in his full humanity, Jesus' lifestyle, what he says, what he does, how he thinks, is fundamental, I think, to what it is that we are really meant to be like. The fullness of humanity, the fullness of our creation, is having the thoughts, the minds, the actions, the attitudes of Jesus. That's really the ultimate human, if you will, is this person of Jesus, and everything that he says and does and teaches, and his relationship with God and his relationship with one another. He is always sensitive, and that's why you will find me in my preaching over and over and over again. I don't have to say anything. I don't have to make anything up. All you have to do is look at his life, And then you take examples from that, and then you just simply apply them to where we are now. So, very, very popular. I don't know what I said that Sunday about polarity. I don't know how that all sort of came about, but when I was preaching about the polar opposites, that really resonated with a lot of people because that's where they find ourselves in our world today, being polarized from one from another. But it's really easy, if you look at the person of Jesus, to know that that polarization could be maybe in the way you think, but not in the way you act or care for one another. Jesus has disagreements with the Sadducees and Pharisees. He gets into fights with them all the time. But it doesn't mean that he hates them. He simply disagrees with them. He dies for them as much. And remember, this Jesus hanging upon the cross, what does he say? Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. Profound. That is ultimately the goal of what we are meant to be as human beings. But the other side of it is that Jesus' death forever satisfies any question of justice on the part of God. God takes the form of man and dies upon a cross so that we can have eternal life with him. We can choose, if we want, to have eternal life with him. We could choose not to. It's entirely up to us. The problem is we're sinners. Someone said to me a couple weeks ago, we got into this conversation, well, the woman who was caught in the act of adultery, Jesus says to her, go and sin no more. And so it's a very clear directive that we're not meant to sin. Yes, clearly we should be making better choices, but I have to admit that the thought that we're never going to sin is probably in and of itself some sort of sin because we're imperfect. Just look at who we are. Look at how we work. Think about just your ordinary lives. Our minds, we wander, we think things, we're influenced, we make bad decisions, even when we don't intend to, we do. So we're always struggling with our brokenness, our frailty. I preach about that all the time, but ultimately those things add up to whatever we would call sin, which is a separation, an activity or a thought or process that somehow is not what God intended us to be. And so because we're always in that state of flux back and forth, we need a Savior, and that's Jesus. We simply need something greater than ourselves to save us from ourselves. And so, yes, as Christians, we believe that Jesus dies and rises again. If he doesn't rise again, it doesn't make any difference. His death would just be the death of another Jew during this period of time. That's just not the case. The fact is that our Jesus is indeed risen from the dead and witnessed to by over 500 individuals who saw him after his resurrection risen from the dead. And so Jesus, by his resurrection, promises what happens next. What happens for us next, what our ultimate goal will be, and that is resurrection. That is our state of being with him forever. And so we are asked to have the mind and the thoughts of Jesus. Jesus lives this world knowing his relationship with the Father, knowing that there's life after death. The whole concept of heaven comes from Jesus. This concept of heaven you don't find much in the Hebrew Scriptures at all. So it's really Jesus that talks about this place where we're in relationship with him. And oh, by the way, by his death and his resurrection, we are saved, we are redeemed. And that's why this season of Lent is so important. It's because we're annually remembering and recalling and almost, and this is a really bad word because I don't think you could ever relive something. In the Roman Catholic tradition, they call it anamnesis. And anamnesis is a memory that is so incredibly deep that it's rooted inside who and what you are. And so for the church, we're having this memory again. We're reliving, we're experiencing this again as though it was the first time, but obviously Jesus has died once and for all. There's no need to have him continually crucified. His death once and for all. But thereby, what does it mean then that his death is once and for all? What does it mean that we're redeemed? And what is it that it means that we're saved? That's the challenge of Christianity. We're constantly looking at ourselves. We're constantly looking at Jesus, and we're trying to not just better ourselves because we have to. We better ourselves because we're exposed to God, and God's goodness challenges us to want to be everything that God has created us to be, which is all goodness. It's just what it is. Okay, so people, going back to the question, what do I give up? Well, here's one that you're not going to like. And it's much harder than M&Ms. Okay? So if anyone wants to leave now, you can. It's okay. Try spending the next couple of weeks not thinking negatively. Yep, that's it. I'll sit down. I don't know about you, but in my mindset, without even really thinking about it or choosing the thoughts, there's always a lot of negativity that comes up about who I am, what I'm capable of, what I look like, 6'5", I'm an oversized tree, there's things that go on over and over in your head. There are. And we don't choose these things. Somewhere along the way in our path, these things have been trained into us or have been fed into us, and somewhere in our innocence, honestly, we have chosen to accept that thinking. And then couple that with what you look on TV and all that, right? And then you see what, all the stars look like, and they're all, my favorite guy is Jack Black. Any guy who can, go in wearing a great tux, and be a little bit more Rapunzel-ish, and round, and and he's very cool. He's who he is, But a lot of us have, one example is just self-image problems, self-image issues. Some of it we've bought into. There's other parts of our lives about, what we think about blacks or Hispanics or Asians, or there are things that just naturally have sort of attached to us without us giving it any real thought. And so negative thoughts come up all the time. They do. They come up all the time about ourselves, about others, about institutions, about this, about that, the other thing. And so the challenge I would ask us to have, if you so dare, try for the next 36 days, try to not think negatively about yourself, about a situation, about a circumstance. Try not to become fearful of those things, because very often negative thoughts leads to us being afraid. And the challenge that I think we have is, as Christians, if we believe in Jesus, if we really believe in Jesus and who and what he is and his Spirit present with us, which is what he promised and what our presence here today validates that we believe, if we believe in Jesus, then can fear and Jesus exist in the same space? Probably not. So somewhere along the way, we're not making a choice for Jesus over fear. We're just being led into fear, and we're just allowing ourselves to go there because we've never checked our thinking to make sure that it is trained properly. And I think those are things that you and I can do. I think those are things that make us better human beings, that we love one another, and also then makes us believe what is absolutely true, that we are acceptable to God. Because that's the big problem. With all the negativity, then we don't think that we're worth anything to ourselves, to our spouse. Then it goes on to our neighbors, others, or thereby, in the end, God. What good are we to God? Look at us. We're a mess. And you're right, we are. I can't take that away from us. We are. We're a mess. But that's why we have a Savior. And that's why Holy Thursday, Good Friday, Easter Sunday is so foundational to who and what we are. It should change the way we think and see ourselves and the world around us and our relationship with God. So this training period for the next 36 days, this training period, whatever it is you choose to do, by the way, just for the record, and so everyone knows, I am not giving up M&Ms. I am not. But for whatever it is that you choose, make sure that it's drawing you closer to others or drawing you closer to God. If you're doing it for the sake of doing it, don't bother. Don't bother. If you're doing it because you want to lose a couple of pounds, don't bother. If you're doing it, you don't know why you're doing it, don't bother. I get that a lot of times, people come up to me and say, "Oh, it's Friday. I can't have meat." I'm all, okay. Why can't you have meat? Oh, I don't know. Okay, that's wrong. You have to know why we're doing things a certain way. It's just wrong. You can't. It doesn't make any intellectual sense, and it's not helping anybody. If you're doing it just for the sake of doing it, then what's that all about? It doesn't draw you, doesn't make you any different by not eating meat than eating meat. And look, for all the folks who watch and you give up meat and you understand why you give up meat and it means something and you connect it to Good Friday and all, blessings on that. I'm simply addressing a much larger audience that honestly doesn't understand what it is that they're doing or why they're doing it. And I'm challenging us to have a sense of what it is that we're giving up and what is the ultimate goal and how are we accomplishing that objective. Happy Lent to everyone.